What could make a superstar guest get physically removed from one of the most watched morning shows in America? Imagine millions of viewers staring at their screens, expecting the usual Halloween fun, only to witness an incident that left the hosts stunned and security scrambling. This wasn't a minor wardrobe malfunction or a harmless slip. This was something far more chaotic, far more unprecedented. And at the center of it all, Meghan Markle. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story begins like any ordinary Halloween segment on the Today Show. Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager had meticulously planned the set for weeks. Pumpkins lined the studio, fake cobwebs draped the corners, and the audience, both live and televised, buzzed with anticipation. Children in adorable costumes sat alongside celebrities dressed in themed attire. The mood was lighthearted, festive, a chance for NBC to entertain, for viewers to escape the ordinary. But then Meghan arrived, and with her presence, the energy in the studio shifted instantly. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air itself change? That's exactly what happened when Meghan Markle stepped onto the Today Show set that morning. Her costume, a meticulously curated outfit that was both playful and audacious, drew immediate attention. Some whispered admiration, others tensed, sensing something unspoken beneath her smile. It was as if she had walked in carrying not just a costume, but a storm waiting to erupt. And erupt it did. Why does this story matter now, in 2025, 2 decades into Meghan's global spotlight? Because the public has been watching her rise, watching her controversies, watching her navigate both fame and infamy. Every appearance she makes is scrutinized. Every word she utters is analyzed. And in an era of social media, where every second is captured, dissected, and broadcasted worldwide, one dramatic misstep can dominate headlines for weeks. This isn't just celebrity gossip. This is a lesson in power, perception, and what happens when tensions boil over in a space designed to be controlled and scripted. The hosts were caught off guard. Savannah Guthrie, known for her calm professionalism, and Jenna Bush Hager, usually radiant and composed, found themselves in unfamiliar territory. The cameras rolled, live footage capturing reactions that no amount of practice could have predicted. There were subtle gestures at first, an awkward glance here, a quick whisper there. But soon, the situation escalated beyond small discomforts. Producers in the control room started signaling, trying to maintain order, trying to anticipate what Meghan might do next. Everyone knew she was unpredictable. Everyone had heard the rumors. But no one expected what unfolded. Imagine, for a moment, the perspective of the crew. They had rehearsed their Halloween segment down to the second. Every prop, every costume, every joke, every line of dialogue had been meticulously planned. And yet, in an instant, the flow of the show was disrupted. Not by technical difficulties, not by a misbehaving prop, but by a guest whose presence itself challenged the environment. How does a team recover when the unexpected is not just a hiccup, but a full-blown crisis? Even before the incident reached its peak, murmurs had spread through the studio. Some staff members exchanged nervous glances, quietly debating whether they should intervene. What would happen if they didn't? Would the live broadcast descend into chaos? And if they did intervene, what would Meghan's reaction be? These were questions that hung in the air like thick fog, impossible to ignore, impossible to resolve quickly. Meanwhile, outside the studio, social media was already primed for explosion. Fans and critics alike had begun speculating. Was Meghan going to surprise the audience with a playful act, or was this the start of something far more dramatic? The tension was palpable. Tweets flew faster than the cameras could capture. Instagram stories teemed with speculation, and YouTube comment sections buzzed with anticipation. Everyone wanted to know, what would Meghan do next? The stakes were more than just the success of a Halloween segment. This was Meghan Markle we're talking about, a figure who has been at the center of royal scandals, media battles, and public fascination for years. Every movement she makes is loaded with interpretation. Every expression analyzed for hidden meaning. The audiences didn't just watch for entertainment. They watched to witness the drama, the unpredictability, the human spectacle of a woman navigating her own brand of controversy in real time. And yet, even as tensions built on the set, the cameras continued to roll. In many ways, this made the drama even more compelling. Live television has a unique energy. Mistakes cannot be edited out. Every word, every gesture is preserved forever. The subtle shifts in Meghan's demeanor, the careful positioning of her body, the fleeting moments of eye contact with the hosts, all of it became part of a narrative that the public would dissect endlessly. But let's pause for a moment. What was Meghan thinking? Was this an intentional provocation, a miscalculated attempt at humor, or something else entirely? It's impossible to know for sure, but every viewer immediately formed an opinion. Every journalist immediately drafted a headline, and every producer on set felt the rush of adrenaline that comes from witnessing the unexpected. When someone like Meghan Markle enters a highly controlled environment, the unpredictability factor is off the charts. What the cameras didn't capture in those first moments would prove to be even more shocking. Behind the scenes, private conversations, whispered instructions, and subtle maneuvers were taking place. Security personnel had begun to prepare quietly, understanding that the situation could escalate beyond what was visible on camera. The hosts tried to maintain their composure, but even the most seasoned professionals were facing an unprecedented challenge: how to handle a guest whose actions were blurring the line between playful celebrity mischief and outright disruption. Now, imagine watching this unfold at home. The live audience is experiencing suspense, confusion, and disbelief simultaneously. You might ask yourself, why would anyone act this way in a public setting? What could be going through her mind? And most importantly, how would this situation resolve itself before it spiraled completely out of control? These questions keep viewers glued to the screen because the answer is far from obvious, and the stakes feel incredibly high. By now, you might be wondering about the deeper implications. This isn't just about a Halloween segment on a morning show. This is about control, perception, and reputation. It's about a guest navigating her public persona while testing boundaries. It's about hosts trying to maintain authority in an environment designed for predictability. And it's about audiences, both in the studio and at home, witnessing the collision of celebrity and chaos in real time. But the most shocking part, the part that would send ripples through the media and the public alike, was still moments away. Producers, staff, hosts, and security all knew that the situation could escalate in an instant, but no one could predict the exact moment when it would explode. And when it did, it would leave a mark on live television history, a story that would be dissected for weeks, months, and possibly years to come. So here's the question that defines the story. What could drive Meghan Markle to a point where Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager, two seasoned hosts, would call security on her during a live broadcast? Was it a clash of personalities? Was it an intentional public statement? Or was there something deeper, more personal at play? Something that no one watching could fully understand in the moment? In just a few moments, you'll hear everything. The initial tensions, the subtle gestures that hinted at escalation, the verbal exchanges that shocked the hosts, the decision to call security, and the chaos that ensued. You'll see how social media amplified the drama, how insider accounts began to emerge, and how every detail combined into a story that left the public in awe. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what happened, but why it mattered, how it happened, and why it was unlike anything seen on morning television before. And just when you think you've seen it all, the final moments will reveal a twist that no one could have predicted, a detail so shocking it would redefine the narrative entirely. What does it feel like when someone enters a room and instantly changes the energy, the air, and the expectations of everyone present? That's exactly what happened on the set of the 2025 NBC Today show Halloween segment when Meghan Markle walked in. It wasn't the usual celebrity entrance, the kind that gets polite applause and camera-friendly smiles. No, this was different. This was a presence that demanded attention, one that subtly suggested she wasn't there to simply participate in scripted fun. The morning had begun like any other. Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager were already at their marks, microphones in place, scripts neatly stacked, producers checking cues, and cameras warmed up and ready to capture every second. There were pumpkins, fake cobwebs, and cheerful decorations that painted a scene straight out of a family-friendly holiday special. The live audience was full of excited kids and adults, their costumes adding color and whimsy to the set. Everything was meticulously planned, rehearsed, and timed down to the second. And then Meghan arrived. The moment she stepped through the studio doors, the subtle hum of excitement shifted. Crew members paused, catching themselves in mid-step, their instincts telling them this was not an ordinary guest. Meghan's costume was striking, deliberately eye-catching, carefully designed to make a statement without saying a word. It was whimsical, yet bold, playful, yet commanding. It was the kind of look that said she belonged, even if everyone in the room didn't entirely agree. The combination of her expression, posture, and subtle energy made it clear she had arrived to own the moment. Savannah Guthrie, ever the professional, tried to maintain her usual composure, greeting Meghan with a polite smile. Jenna Bush Hager mirrored the sentiment, keeping her tone cheerful but guarded. Yet, despite their best efforts, tension rippled through the room. Crew members whispered quietly, unsure whether to intervene or simply let events unfold. Some glanced at each other, eyebrows raised, as if asking silently, "What is she doing here?" Others tried to focus on camera angles, hoping the live broadcast wouldn't betray the underlying tension. What made this moment especially striking was Meghan's aura of confidence mixed with unpredictability. She had walked onto countless stages, into countless high-profile situations, yet there was something different this time. Something subtle in her gaze, a flicker of challenge in her smile, a poised stance that suggested she was prepared for whatever reactions might come. And for those watching in the studio, it was impossible not to notice. Immediately, the hosts sensed it. Savannah exchanged a look with Jenna, brief but loaded with understanding. Both realized the segment they had rehearsed for weeks could suddenly veer into uncharted territory. They weren't accustomed to being upstaged by a guest. They were used to guiding conversations, controlling the flow of live television. Yet here was someone who seemed to be bending, if not breaking, that dynamic with just her presence. Questions began forming in the minds of the crew and hosts alike. Was this a harmless act of playfulness? A misunderstood attempt at humor? Or was there an underlying motive, an intention to disrupt, provoke, or dominate the space? The ambiguity created a charged atmosphere, and as the cameras started rolling, capturing the unfolding scenario for millions of viewers, the tension became palpable. Meghan moved through the studio with the ease of someone accustomed to public scrutiny, yet there was an unmistakable ripple effect. Children in costumes looked up, some giggling nervously, sensing the subtle tension. Staff members behind the scenes whispered, unsure if they should step in or observe. Even the producers, who had handled countless live broadcasts, felt their pulse quicken. There was a sense that this moment, though seemingly ordinary, could explode at any second. As the segment began, Meghan's interactions with the hosts were initially subtle. A well-timed smile, a carefully placed gesture, and a seemingly innocent comment were layered with nuance. It was almost as if she were testing boundaries, gauging reactions, observing the room while simultaneously influencing it. For viewers at home, this might have appeared as lighthearted banter, but for those present, the tension was undeniable. Every word was loaded, every movement interpreted, every glance analyzed. It didn't take long for the first signs of friction to appear. Savannah attempted to steer the conversation according to the planned script, asking questions, prompting jokes, and guiding segments. But Meghan had a rhythm of her own. She responded with subtle deflections, playful interruptions, and occasionally pointed remarks that seemed innocent yet carried an undercurrent of challenge. Each instance was small, almost imperceptible, but cumulative. By the fifth or sixth interaction, the energy in the room had shifted from controlled excitement to tense anticipation. One crew member later described the feeling as a slow boil. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a slight shift in tone, a pause too long, a glance exchanged in the control room. But over minutes, the tension grew, spreading through the studio like electricity. Those in the audience began to sense it subconsciously, fidgeting, whispering, leaning forward in curiosity. The moment had transformed from a playful Halloween segment into a high-stakes social experiment. How would the hosts manage this unpredictable presence? And more importantly, what would Meghan do next? Meanwhile, the cameras captured every nuance. Live television has a way of amplifying human emotion. A small pause can seem like hesitation, a brief smile can feel sarcastic, and a casual gesture can be interpreted as intentional defiance. In this environment, every micro-expression was scrutinized. Producers in the control room monitored feeds obsessively, ready to intervene if the situation escalated. They knew that live television is unforgiving. One misstep could become headline news, viral clips, and endless social media debate in a matter of minutes. And then came the first real disruption. A comment, seemingly innocent, carried an unintended bite. Meghan's timing was impeccable, her tone measured yet impactful. It wasn't overtly aggressive, but the implication was clear. She wasn't just participating, she was asserting herself in a space that traditionally followed scripted rules. Savannah and Jenna tried to navigate the moment, maintaining their professionalism while also reacting instinctively. Micro-expressions betrayed frustration, subtle adjustments in posture suggested growing tension, and brief whispers between the hosts hinted at the challenge of keeping control. By this point, the crew was already anticipating potential escalation. Security personnel, previously stationed discreetly, began positioning themselves strategically, observing Meghan's movements, ready to respond if necessary. Every camera angle, every microphone, every monitor became part of an intricate web, capturing not only the entertainment element, but the unfolding drama. It was live, raw, and charged with emotion, a perfect storm waiting to hit its peak. The audience at home, oblivious to the backstage maneuvers, saw a slightly tense segment filled with what appeared to be playful exchanges. But anyone familiar with live television dynamics could sense the undercurrent. There was tension, anticipation, and the unspoken possibility that something could break through at any moment. It was that delicate line between ordinary broadcast and extraordinary disruption that made the situation so compelling. As the segment progressed, Meghan's presence became increasingly magnetic. Every gesture, every glance, every word seemed to pull attention toward her. It wasn't just a performance, it was an assertion of influence. The hosts, trained to command the stage, found themselves subtly reacting to her cues, adjusting their delivery, and recalibrating their approach. For the first time in years, the carefully orchestrated flow of a live morning show was being tested by a guest who refused to conform entirely to the expected norms. And just when it seemed that tension had peaked, there was a shift in body language, a subtle but unmistakable signal that the next moment would be pivotal. A pause, a glance exchanged between Meghan and Savannah, and the room collectively held its breath. Everyone sensed it, the tipping point was near. Something was about to happen that would change the dynamics of the entire broadcast. The cameras continued rolling, the audience watching in anticipation, the crew holding their collective breath. The energy had transformed from casual celebration to high-stakes suspense. And in that charged atmosphere, one question loomed over everyone in the room. What would Meghan do next? Would she playfully engage, escalate the tension, or cross a line that no one expected? What could a single outfit do to send an entire live television set into chaos? To many viewers at home, costumes are just fun, playful additions to a Halloween segment. Pumpkins, witches, superheroes, silly masks. But Meghan Markle's choice that day was anything but ordinary. It wasn't just about a theme or a look, it was a statement. And statements, as we all know, carry power, especially when delivered in front of millions of live viewers and seasoned hosts like Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager. The moment Meghan appeared on camera, heads turned. Whispers rippled across the studio. Crew members exchanged subtle glances, trying to mask their uncertainty. The outfit was bold, whimsical, and provocative all at once. Some interpreted it as playful, others as audacious, and a few as calculated. It combined elements of pop culture, royal references, and subtle irony, a combination that could spark amusement, admiration, or outright controversy. It was layered, as if every piece of the costume carried a secret message only a few could decode. Savannah and Jenna, for their part, initially tried to treat it as lighthearted fun. Savannah's smile remained measured, professional, while Jenna attempted to incorporate the outfit into her questions, making references to Halloween themes and celebrity pop culture. But the reality was that Meghan's presence transformed the segment from playful holiday cheer into a subtle power play. Every movement she made, every gesture, seemed intentional, designed to draw attention, to dominate the frame, and perhaps to unsettle the hosts. Audience perception played a huge role. Children in the studio giggled and pointed, intrigued by the novelty. while adults whispered among themselves, trying to interpret what the costume meant. Viewers at home were equally engaged, but for very different reasons. Social media immediately lit up with speculation. Memes were created in real time, tweets speculated on hidden meanings, and forums erupted with debates. Was Meghan making a political statement? Was it an ironic nod to recent events in her life? Or was it simply a playful Halloween costume? The ambiguity fueled curiosity, keeping eyes glued to screens. Even before Meghan spoke a word, the costume itself was doing the talking. Some elements seemed playful, bright colors, whimsical accessories, but others were deliberate and audacious. Observers quickly began reading into the details: jewelry placement, subtle emblems, symbolic props. Every layer seemed intentional, every detail curated to provoke thought, amusement, or perhaps discomfort. It was a costume that demanded interpretation, that transformed the segment from ordinary holiday fun into something much more layered and complex. The tension between hosts and guests began to simmer. Savannah attempted to engage Meghan in conversation about the costume, asking playful questions about her inspiration. Jenna chimed in with commentary, trying to maintain a lighthearted tone while subtly steering the narrative toward the intended theme of the segment. But Meghan's responses were layered, nuanced, and carefully measured. Each word carried multiple interpretations, making the hosts hesitate. They weren't used to navigating such subtle, multifaceted messaging during live television. They were trained to follow the script, not deconstruct it in real time. And then came the first noticeable clash. Meghan made a comment, seemingly innocuous but layered with irony, that referenced a controversial media event from earlier that year. To the untrained eye, it might have been a joke, a playful tease. But the subtext was unmistakable. She was challenging, questioning, and testing boundaries. Savannah's smile tightened. Jenna's laughter was slightly forced. Both hosts immediately sensed the duality. There was humor on the surface, but beneath it, a tension that could escalate if not handled carefully. What made the situation even more complicated was the live audience. Their reactions were immediate, audible, and impossible to ignore. Gasps, laughter, whispers, they all combined to create a real-time feedback loop. Meghan's costume, combined with her commentary, became the catalyst for a series of reactions: amusement for some, discomfort for others, curiosity for nearly everyone. Live television magnifies these moments, turning subtle cues into amplified experiences. Every micro-expression, every gesture was now under scrutiny. Behind the scenes, the crew's anxiety grew. Producers exchanged quick, concerned glances, communicating silently through hand signals. Security personnel subtly shifted positions, keeping an eye on Meghan's interactions, aware that the combination of attention, unpredictability, and live broadcast created an environment ripe for disruption. Even minor movements could be interpreted as challenges, provocations, or signals for escalation. Social media began reflecting the tension almost immediately. Clips of Meghan adjusting her costume, smiling in certain ways, and responding to hosts were posted in real time. Fans and critics dissected every frame, every detail, every gesture. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Meghan Halloween, hashtag Today Show Drama, hashtag Savannah vs. Meghan. The commentary was polarizing. Some hailed her as confident and bold. Others criticized her for overshadowing the intended segment. The internet's instant response turned a local, live incident into a global conversation within minutes. But inside the studio, the tension continued to mount. Savannah and Jenna were professionals, but the dynamic had shifted. They were no longer merely hosting a Halloween segment. They were navigating the unpredictable presence of a guest whose every action carried potential consequences. And Meghan seemed fully aware of this. Every movement, every word, every playful glance was designed to keep the hosts on their toes, subtly asserting dominance while maintaining an outwardly playful demeanor. This duality was what made the moment so compelling. On one level, it was Halloween fun. On another, it was a subtle performance of influence and control. Meghan's costume was more than fabric and accessories. It was a tool, a message, a carefully curated statement. And as the segment continued, it became increasingly clear that this visual declaration was creating more than just amusement. It was creating tension, speculation, and a sense of unpredictability that the hosts had never faced before. Viewers at home may not have realized how much context mattered. Every subtle cue, the tilt of her head, the placement of her hands, the gleam in her eye, added layers of meaning. Some staff whispered about past incidents, drawing parallels to previous appearances where Meghan had tested boundaries and asserted influence in unexpected ways. Others debated quietly whether the costume choice was spontaneous or meticulously planned, a calculated move designed to provoke, amuse, or dominate. And then the tension escalated further. A casual joke from the hosts, intended to acknowledge the Halloween spirit, was met with a pointed, slightly ironic comment from Meghan. On the surface, it appeared humorous, but the underlying message was unmistakable. She was not just participating, she was shaping the narrative. Savannah and Jenna exchanged looks, realizing that their usual methods of guiding conversation were no longer fully effective. The playful Halloween segment had subtly transformed into a high-stakes interaction where every word and gesture carried weight. The live audience reacted in real time, some laughing nervously, others watching closely, unsure of how to interpret the unfolding interaction. Crew members adjusted positions, monitoring both the hosts and Meghan, aware that a single misstep could escalate the situation beyond simple holiday entertainment. Every eye in the studio was now tuned to subtle cues, anticipating the next move, the next comment, the next reaction. Outside the studio, social media was ablaze. Clips of the costume and Meghan's commentary spread rapidly. Fans and critics dissected every frame, every angle, every nuance. Discussion threads speculated on hidden meanings, potential provocations, and the possibility of a live confrontation. Memes were created, Twitter debates flourished, and the story began to take on a life of its own, one that would dominate headlines and online commentary for days to come. But what Meghan's costume had done was more than just spark curiosity. It had shifted power dynamics. For the hosts, it was a test of composure and professionalism under pressure. For the crew, it was a test of crisis management in a live broadcast setting. And for the audience, it was an invitation to watch unpredictability unfold in real time, to engage, react, and speculate. And just when it seemed the tension had reached its peak, Meghan made a small, seemingly innocuous gesture, adjusting an accessory, tilting her head slightly, locking eyes with Savannah for a brief second. That changed everything. The subtle action, almost invisible to viewers at home, signaled a turning point. A challenge had been issued. And the room, both on camera and behind the scenes, knew it. From that moment on, the Halloween segment was no longer about lighthearted fun. It had become a high-stakes interplay of wit, presence, and influence. Every subsequent interaction, every word exchanged, every glance shared was loaded with anticipation. The atmosphere crackled with potential, and everyone present sensed that the unfolding events would not conclude without leaving a mark on the hosts, the crew, the live audience, and viewers at home. And then the first real confrontation loomed, subtle at first, but unmistakably approaching. A moment that would trigger the involvement of security and set off a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. What happens when words, carefully chosen and strategically placed, collide with egos, expectations, and live television in front of millions? That's exactly what began to unfold once Meghan Markle started speaking. It was no longer just about the costume or her presence. It was about dialogue, tone, timing, and subtle provocations. Every sentence she uttered carried a double meaning, a layered intention, or a subtle challenge that left Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager scrambling to maintain control. At first, her comments were lighthearted, seemingly in line with the Halloween theme. She complimented the set, playfully remarked on some of the children's costumes, and engaged with the hosts using seemingly innocuous humor. But beneath the surface, there was something else, a subtext, a subtle assertiveness that suggested she was not just a guest participating in the segment, but a guest testing boundaries, challenging the host's authority, and measuring reactions. Savannah Guthrie, a seasoned professional with years of live television experience, initially responded with measured politeness. Her questions were carefully framed to guide the conversation back to the intended narrative of the Halloween segment. Jenna Bush Hager, equally composed, tried to inject humor and energy to maintain a festive atmosphere. Yet, even as they did their best to steer the discussion, Meghan's responses contained layers that hinted at something more: a personal agenda, a subtle critique, or perhaps a veiled commentary on her own media portrayal. The first real verbal friction came during a playful question about Halloween traditions. Savannah asked, "Meghan, what's your favorite Halloween memory?" The question seemed simple, routine, expected, but Meghan's answer was loaded. She referenced an anecdote about public perception and criticism, lightly framing it as a humorous story, but one that drew attention to the scrutiny she often faced. The remark, innocent on its surface, immediately introduced tension. Savannah's smile faltered for a split second, and Jenna's laughter came a beat too late. Crew members exchanged subtle glances, recognizing the escalation. This moment was crucial. It revealed Meghan's skill in blending humor with provocation. She had mastered the art of delivering statements that entertained while also subtly challenging the hosts. The live audience sensed it as well. Some laughed along, some paused, sensing the tension beneath the surface. In that split second, the dynamic shifted. Meghan was no longer just participating in the segment. She was controlling the energy, influencing reactions, and creating a psychological ripple effect. Every subsequent exchange continued this delicate dance. Savannah asked light-hearted questions about the costume, and Meghan responded with answers that seemed playful but carried a slightly pointed undertone. Jenna attempted to redirect the conversation toward audience engagement, but Meghan's timing and phrasing made redirection difficult. The subtle power struggle unfolded in real time. Hosts trying to maintain authority, Meghan asserting influence without overt confrontation, and everyone else in the room caught in a delicate balancing act of observation, anticipation, and preparation. The live audience reacted to these exchanges in varied ways. Children in costumes giggled at the surface-level humor, unaware of the nuanced tension. Adults noticed subtleties in body language, tone, and pacing. They saw the micro-expressions, the slight raise of an eyebrow, a brief tightening of the lips, the pauses that suggested anticipation or hesitation. These small signals amplified the drama, creating an immersive experience that made the segment feel tense, unpredictable, and charged with energy. Meanwhile, behind the cameras, the crew monitored every detail. Producers whispered to one another, assessing the potential risk of escalation. Security personnel, though remaining discreet, began noting patterns of movement, positioning themselves strategically, anticipating that a tipping point could arrive at any moment. The difference between a smooth segment and a televised disaster was now razor-thin, and Meghan's verbal exchanges were pushing the boundaries of that balance. Social media mirrored the live tension. Clips of Meghan speaking, her tone and phrasing dissected frame by frame, spread rapidly. Comments speculated on hidden meanings, possible provocations, and even predicted that the situation might escalate further. Fans debated whether her responses were strategic, spontaneous, or a combination of both. Critics scrutinized every word, every laugh, every pause, amplifying the impact of each verbal exchange beyond the studio walls. At one point, Meghan subtly referenced a recent controversy involving media coverage of her personal life. She framed it as a joke, but the timing and delivery were precise. Savannah's response was professional but measured, attempting to maintain a lighthearted tone, while Jenna responded with a laugh that carried just a hint of unease. It was a masterclass in verbal nuance. Meghan delivered content that could entertain, provoke, and unsettle simultaneously. The verbal sparring continued to build tension incrementally. Meghan would respond with humor, hosts would counter with professional composure, and the crew would watch anxiously, anticipating what might come next. Each exchange served to escalate curiosity, not just within the studio, but among the millions watching live. Viewers could sense the subtle power dynamics at play, even if they didn't fully understand the underlying tensions. Then came a particularly striking moment. Meghan made a comment that appeared innocuous, a playful reference to Halloween history, but the underlying implication was clear. It was a subtle critique of media treatment and public perception, wrapped in humor and delivered with impeccable timing. Savannah paused for a brief moment, processing the nuance, while Jenna adjusted her posture, trying to reclaim conversational control. Crew members shifted nervously, understanding that the line between humor and provocation had just been approached, if not crossed. The tension was now palpable. It wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, it was psychological, a simmering pressure that could erupt at any second. The interplay between verbal dexterity and authority, between playful teasing and subtle challenge, had transformed the segment from a Halloween celebration into a live performance of influence, perception, and control. Every word mattered. Every pause carried weight. Every glance could tip the balance. For viewers, this was compelling television. The narrative had shifted subtly but decisively. The segment was no longer about Halloween festivities. It was about watching personalities interact under pressure, observing subtle strategies unfold in real time. The unpredictability kept audiences glued to the screen, wondering how far the verbal exchanges would go and what the consequences would be if the tension reached its breaking point. The studio felt like a powder keg. Everyone knew it. Meghan had tested the waters, subtly challenging the host's authority while engaging the audience. Savannah and Jenna were professionals, but the psychological pressure was unprecedented. Crew members monitored signals, cameras captured reactions, and security personnel remained vigilant, ready to intervene if escalation became necessary. Every participant was acutely aware that the next verbal exchange could trigger a tipping point that would change the course of the broadcast entirely. And then it happened. A comment, small but pointed, that seemed innocent at first glance but carried a provocative edge. The hosts reacted instinctively. Savannah's eyes narrowed subtly. Jenna's laugh came with tension, and the studio collectively sensed that the situation had reached a new level of intensity. Crew members held their breath. Security moved discreetly into position. And in that moment, everyone understood. The verbal exchanges had reached the point where professional composure alone might no longer suffice. The audience, both live and at home, was oblivious to the backstage anticipation. They saw humor, banter, and playful engagement. But beneath the surface, the stakes had escalated. The power dynamic had shifted. The hosts were no longer fully in control. Meghan's verbal dexterity had subtly taken command of the narrative, influencing reactions and creating uncertainty. It was a live experiment in psychology, communication, and strategy unfolding in real time. And just when it seemed that tension could be contained within clever wordplay and subtle gestures, the next exchange would push the situation over the edge. Something would occur, something unplanned, unpredictable, and explosive that would demand immediate action from the hosts and, ultimately, the intervention of security. Imagine the weight of a moment when a live television broadcast, the kind millions of viewers are tuned into, suddenly teeters on the edge of chaos. The energy in the studio had already been building, subtle yet palpable, as Meghan Markle's verbal exchanges had pushed the dynamics beyond normal conversational boundaries. Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager were seasoned hosts, trained to manage unexpected interruptions, playful antics, and even high-profile personalities, but nothing could have fully prepared them for what was about to unfold. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Meghan leaned slightly closer during a discussion, her voice calm but precise, delivering a comment that was equal parts humor and provocation. It was a line that might have gone unnoticed on any other day, with any other guest, in any other studio. But in this charged atmosphere, it landed differently. The hosts exchanged glances, quick, almost instinctive, signaling recognition that the segment had begun to slip beyond their control. The audience, meanwhile, caught fragments of tension, sensing an energy shift, their reactions teetering between curiosity and unease. Audience, meanwhile, caught fragments of tension, sensing an energy shift, their reactions teetering between curiosity and unease. For the crew, the realization was immediate. Control of the live broadcast was no longer just about timing or camera angles. It was about anticipating escalation, reading microsignals, and preparing for potential intervention. Security personnel, previously stationed discreetly near the edges of the studio, subtly adjusted their positions. They had been aware of Meghan's presence and her unpredictable reputation, but now the need for vigilance intensified. Every gesture, every glance, every breath became a signal. This moment could turn physical, and they had to be ready. Savannah tried to maintain composure, smiling politely, asking the next question to redirect the conversation. Jenna echoed this effort, weaving humor into her words to maintain the festive Halloween tone. But Meghan's responses were layered, deliberate, and unyielding. She smiled, laughed, and spoke with a rhythm that was unpredictable. Every time the hosts attempted to guide the dialogue, Meghan gently sidestepped, delivered an ironic twist, or added a subtle critique hidden within humor. The tension built incrementally but inexorably, and then the first audible sign that escalation might be unavoidable emerged. Meghan made a statement, a comment about public perception and control, that, while veiled in humor, carried unmistakable weight. It suggested that she was not just participating but asserting influence over the narrative. Savannah's response faltered momentarily. Jenna tried to inject levity, but the timing was off. The energy in the studio had shifted. It was no longer playful. Something heavier was at play. The live audience reacted almost instinctively. Some laughed nervously, others leaned forward in curiosity, and a few whispered among themselves, sensing the tension. Cameras captured subtle micro-expressions on both hosts: tightened lips, raised eyebrows, slight shifts in posture. Behind the scenes, the crew whispered quietly into headsets, debating whether intervention was needed or whether they could rely on the hosts to manage the situation. Every second stretched the tension tighter, like a rope pulled to its limit. Security's presence, initially unobtrusive, now became essential. They positioned themselves strategically, ready to intervene should Meghan's actions cross a line that could disrupt the broadcast or threaten safety. The live nature of the segment complicated matters. The solution had to be discreet yet effective, invisible to the audience but immediately actionable if necessary. Every movement was calculated, every hand signal and whisper behind the cameras part of a carefully orchestrated plan to maintain control while avoiding panic. Then came the subtle spark. Meghan moved closer to Savannah, her tone calm but sharp, delivering a statement that indirectly questioned authority and control. To an untrained observer, it might have sounded playful, teasing even. But in the context of live broadcast dynamics, it was a signal. The segment had shifted from controlled fun to potential volatility. Savannah's smile wavered. Jenna's laughter now carried tension. The crew knew intervention was imminent. Security prepared themselves, monitoring proximity, watching for any sign of physical escalation. But what made this moment extraordinary wasn't physicality, it was psychological. Meghan's presence, her verbal dexterity, and her deliberate use of space and attention created an environment charged with tension. She wasn't threatening physically, but the combination of unpredictability and dominance was enough to require precaution. Live television amplifies perception, and in this environment, even a minor movement could appear threatening. As Meghan continued speaking, the host struggled to maintain control. Savannah attempted to guide the conversation toward lighter Halloween topics, using humor and strategic questions. Jenna mirrored this, adding playful commentary, but every attempt was met with subtle deflection, irony, or a carefully placed turn of phrase from Meghan. The tension escalated incrementally, a psychological pressure cooker, the studio collectively holding its breath in anticipation of what might come next. Then, the first intervention occurred, albeit subtle. Security stepped slightly closer, signaling readiness without drawing attention. Producers in the control room whispered instructions, coordinating potential actions if escalation reached a point of no return. Even crew members near cameras adjusted their positions, prepared for a rapid response. It was a silent ballet of anticipation, strategy, and vigilance, performed behind the scenes while the live broadcast continued uninterrupted. Meanwhile, Meghan's verbal exchanges continued to challenge the host's authority, subtly asserting control while maintaining the appearance of decorum. The effect was mesmerizing. Live television transformed into a stage for psychological interplay, a complex dance of influence, perception, and subtle confrontation. Every word mattered. Every glance mattered. Every movement could trigger the next escalation. Then came the critical moment. Meghan delivered a statement that, while wrapped in humor, was unmistakably provocative. It referenced previous media coverage and subtly implied misjudgment by the hosts. Savannah's professional composure wavered just slightly. Jenna's smile tightened. Crew members behind the scenes reacted, recognizing that the escalation threshold had been crossed. The subtle tension that had been building since Meghan's arrival was now poised to erupt into visible confrontation. At this point, security could no longer remain passive. They moved in closer, maintaining distance but demonstrating readiness. It was clear to everyone present that the next move, whether verbal, physical, or gesture-driven, would dictate immediate action. Cameras continued rolling, capturing every nuance, every expression, every pause, creating a record that would later be dissected by millions of viewers online. Social media mirrored the suspense in real time. Clips of Meghan's comments, her timing, and her interactions were shared within seconds. Analysts and commentators debated whether her actions were deliberate provocations, strategic assertions of influence, or playful antics misunderstood by the hosts. Hashtags began trending within minutes. Hashtag Today Show Chaos. Hashtag Meghan Live. Hashtag Savannah vs. Meghan. The global audience was engaged, their attention held by the suspense building in real time on live television. Inside the studio, the tipping point was clear. Meghan's verbal cues, her control of space, and the precision of her delivery had created a situation where hosts, crew, and security were all acutely aware that escalation could happen in an instant. Every micro-expression was analyzed, every gesture interpreted, and every reaction considered a potential trigger for the next critical moment. And then it happened. The moment that transformed subtle tension into immediate action. Meghan leaned slightly forward, emphasizing a point in a way that carried unintended implication to the hosts. Savannah and Jenna exchanged a quick, silent signal, a mutual acknowledgement that intervention was required. Security personnel, positioned discreetly, stepped forward just enough to make themselves noticeable without alarming the audience, ready to respond if necessary. What followed was a delicate, high-stakes dance. Meghan continued speaking, maintaining a veneer of charm and decorum, while the hosts and security navigated the fine line between control, de-escalation, and live television spectacle. The audience remained unaware of the precise backstage orchestration, but the tension radiated through the cameras, the subtle shifts in posture, and the cadence of speech. Every second held the potential for drama, every word a precursor to escalation. When the cameras cut to a brief Halloween commercial break, most viewers assumed the segment was simply transitioning. What they couldn't see, what no broadcast could capture, was the chaos unfolding behind the scenes. The energy that had been simmering during Meghan Markle's appearance now boiled into a tense storm, confined to narrow hallways, production rooms, and hidden corners of the NBC Today Show studio. This was backstage drama in its rawest, most unfiltered form, a collision of personalities, power, and protocol that would eventually spill over into headlines. The first sign of disruption came from the crew themselves. Producers who had meticulously planned every moment of the Halloween segment were scrambling. Papers rustled, headset microphones crackled with whispered instructions, and the normally calm floor director barked sharp, urgent cues. Every second counted, and everyone understood that the delicate balance between live television professionalism and an unpredictable guest was now in jeopardy. There was a collective recognition. If Meghan acted on impulse, the segment could quickly escalate into a full-blown spectacle of chaos. Meghan herself, meanwhile, had retreated momentarily from the main set, yet her presence continued to dominate the backstage space. Her body language radiated confidence, control, and calculation, even in the absence of cameras. Assistants and crew members exchanged quiet glances, unsure whether her behavior was casual or deliberately provocative. Some whispered speculations. Was she making a subtle statement about media coverage, testing the boundaries of NBC's authority, or simply enjoying the thrill of unpredictability? The answers were unclear, and the ambiguity fueled tension. Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager were simultaneously trying to regroup. Backstage, they huddled with producers, discussing how to handle the unpredictable scenario without derailing the live broadcast. Savannah, known for her composure under pressure, spoke in a clipped, controlled tone, outlining a plan to reassert authority once the cameras returned. Jenna, a bit more expressive by nature, suggested alternative approaches to engage Meghan without provoking further tension. Both understood that one misstep could escalate the situation further, and potentially necessitate the physical intervention of security. Security personnel, meanwhile, were coordinating quietly, positioning themselves strategically to ensure they could respond instantly if necessary. Their training emphasized discretion, intervene only when absolutely required, remain unobtrusive, and maintain professional demeanor to avoid escalating the tension. Yet even the professionals recognized that Meghan's unpredictability complicated everything. She was not a guest to be managed in conventional ways. Each subtle glance, shift in posture, and deliberate pause became a potential trigger, demanding heightened awareness. Backstage, Meghan was speaking quietly with an assistant, but her words carried unmistakable intent. Observers described her tone as calm, measured, yet assertive, commanding attention without raising her voice. Even from a distance, the psychological impact of her presence was palpable. Crew members instinctively leaned closer to whisper to one another, speculating on her motives. "Is she planning the next move?" one whispered. "Or is this all improvisation?" another replied. "Does she even realize how tense this is getting?" Meanwhile, the production team was racing against the clock. Live television doesn't pause for backstage drama. Commercial breaks are fleeting, and the cameras would return imminently. Decisions had to be made in real time. How to reintegrate Meghan into the broadcast, how to prevent escalation on air, and how to maintain the illusion of normalcy for millions of viewers. It was an intricate, high-pressure puzzle, made more challenging by the fact that the guest at the center, Meghan herself, was far from predictable. Tension spiked further when a producer inadvertently walked too close to Meghan, prompting a subtle but unmistakable shift in her posture. Observers later described the scene as charged with unspoken communication, a mix of challenge, assessment, and anticipation. Crew members instinctively took a step back, understanding that even minor movements could be misinterpreted. The backstage area had transformed into a pressure cooker. Every action was analyzed, every pause scrutinized, every glance loaded with potential significance. At the same time, Savannah and Jenna were recalibrating their on-air approach. They discussed potential dialogue adjustments, subtle cues to regain control of the conversation, and contingency plans if Meghan attempted to dominate the upcoming segment again. Their objective was clear: maintain professionalism, redirect the narrative, and prevent the scenario from escalating into overt confrontation. Yet they were acutely aware that Meghan's unpredictability made conventional strategies unreliable. Social media, meanwhile, continued to buzz. Live updates, speculative tweets, and trending hashtags ensured that the drama was no longer confined to the studio. Viewers were already dissecting every clip from earlier in the segment, debating whether Meghan's actions were strategic, spontaneous, or deliberately provocative. Memes proliferated, online forums debated every nuance, and the anticipation for what would happen once cameras returned reached a fever pitch. Backstage drama wasn't limited to strategy and speculation. It was also intensely emotional. Crew members experienced a mixture of awe, fear, and exhilaration. For some, observing Meghan's ability to command attention without overt aggression was impressive. For others, the potential volatility was nerve-wracking. The psychological tension was amplified by the knowledge that one wrong move could spill into live broadcast disaster. It was a unique moment where celebrity, unpredictability, and professional responsibility collided, creating a scenario that no rehearsal or preparation could fully anticipate. And then, the moment of reintegration approached. Producers signaled the hosts that the cameras would return live in moments. Savannah and Jenna took deep breaths, straightened their posture, and mentally prepared for what could be another unpredictable round of exchanges. Meghan, aware of the camera's imminent return, adjusted her stance, subtly signaling readiness to re-engage. The stage was set for the next dramatic act, a continuation of the tension that had been simmering backstage. But the most remarkable element of the backstage chaos was not visible to the audience at home. Hidden conversations, whispered instructions, subtle gestures, and quiet calculations unfolded in real time. The interplay between crew, hosts, security, and guest created a complex web of anticipation, strategy, and psychological maneuvering. It was a behind-the-scenes drama layered with nuance, tension, and stakes far higher than the Halloween segment initially intended. And just as the cameras were about to return live, A sudden movement, a sharp glance, and an unexpected comment hinted that the next phase of this unfolding drama would escalate beyond anything anyone had anticipated. The backstage energy had reached a critical mass. The tension, uncertainty, and anticipation were now perfectly aligned for the explosive moment that was about to occur. In the age of instant connectivity, nothing stays private for long, especially when millions are watching live television. The moment Meghan Markle's presence and behavior began causing tension on the Today Show set, it wasn't just the studio that felt the ripple, it was the entire digital world. Social media erupted almost immediately, amplifying every glance, every gesture, every subtle nuance into global commentary, debate, and speculation. What might have been a contained, backstage issue transformed within seconds into a viral spectacle. Viewers at home were already glued to their screens, sensing that something was off. Clips from the first half of the segment began circulating on Twitter before the commercial break had even ended. Short clips of Meghan adjusting her costume, exchanging glances with Savannah, and responding with subtle irony spread like wildfire. The audience online dissected every micro-expression, debating whether her behavior was playful, provocative, or strategic. Within minutes, hashtags like hashtag Meghan Today Show, hashtag Savannah vs. Meghan, and hashtag Halloween Chaos were trending across multiple platforms. The viral nature of live television content is unpredictable, but in this case, it was immediate and overwhelming. Memes started to appear, framing Meghan in exaggerated, humorous, and sometimes critical ways. GIFs captured split-second expressions: Meghan's smirk, Savannah's tightened smile, Jenna's nervous laugh. The virality created a feedback loop. Online speculation influenced viewers watching live, who then discussed it further on social media, driving even more engagement and tension. Social media wasn't just reacting, it was narrating. Commentators, celebrities, and fans began offering interpretations in real time. Some praised Meghan's confidence, highlighting her ability to control attention and maintain composure. Others criticized her, claiming she had upstaged the hosts, disrupted the show, or even disrespected the production team. Opinions were polarizing, intense, and fast-moving. Every moment she spoke or moved on set became fodder for conversation, often decontextualized, analyzed, and debated endlessly. The emotional spikes online mirrored the tension in the studio. People debated the subtle power dynamics between Meghan and the hosts, speculated on her intent, and questioned the reactions of Savannah and Jenna. Every tweet, Instagram story, and TikTok clip fueled curiosity and suspense, keeping the broader audience engaged and hungry for updates. Even those who weren't watching live tuned in through social media updates, creating a sense of immediacy and urgency around the unfolding drama. But the digital frenzy also had backstage consequences. Crew members monitored social media feeds as they attempted to regain control of the broadcast. Producers and security were acutely aware that any viral clip could impact public perception, escalate the situation, and put additional pressure on the hosts. Every new post, tweet, or shared video added weight to the unfolding events, amplifying tension and heightening the stakes. Memes and viral commentary often highlighted contradictions and humor. Some users joked about Meghan's Halloween costume choices, exaggerating elements for comedic effect. Others speculated about hidden messages or symbolic statements, dissecting accessories, colors, and gestures in ways that made the subtlety of live interactions appear deliberate and calculated. The online community became a secondary audience, reacting to a version of the event filtered through snippets, clips, and personal interpretations, all of which intensified the perception of drama. Meanwhile, journalists and media outlets began reporting in real time. Headlines were drafted, teasers posted, and social media threads expanded to cover every minor incident on the set. Some outlets portrayed Meghan as confident and assertive. Others framed her behavior as disruptive and disrespectful. The speed of information dissemination meant that no single narrative dominated. Multiple competing interpretations emerged simultaneously, feeding curiosity, discussion, and emotional engagement. Within the studio, the crew observed the digital eruption with a mix of anxiety and fascination. They understood that the global audience was already forming judgments, creating narratives, and anticipating further escalation. What happened on the set didn't stay confined to the physical space. It expanded into millions of screens, simultaneously shaping perception and expectation. Every pause, every glance, every subtle interaction on camera was magnified and scrutinized. Fans and critics alike speculated about potential consequences for Meghan, the hosts, and NBC. Questions circulated rapidly. Would security be called? How would Savannah and Jenna respond? Was this the start of a larger public confrontation? Could this incident have long-term repercussions for Meghan's public image? Each post and comment built suspense, creating a digital anticipation that paralleled the physical tension in the studio. The social media response wasn't limited to the United States. International audiences picked up on clips, commentary, and memes, further amplifying the situation. Analysts speculated on global perceptions of Meghan's behavior, drawing connections to prior controversies, public appearances, and media narratives. The incident quickly transcended its initial context, evolving into a discussion about power, celebrity influence, and the unpredictable nature of live television. Despite the chaos online, the production team had to continue managing the live broadcast. Every word and gesture became more heavily scrutinized as the awareness of millions of viewers, including those monitoring social media in real time, created additional pressure. The cameras were now capturing not only the intended segment, but the intricate psychological interplay between host and guest, a dynamic that had become layered with tension, unpredictability, and anticipation. And then came the moment that truly set social media on fire. A subtle comment, a brief smirk, a glance exchanged between Meghan and Savannah, imperceptible to the untrained eye, was captured on camera and instantly shared online. The reaction was immediate. Thousands of retweets, millions of views, and a flood of commentary dissecting what had happened. Fans debated her intent, critics questioned her behavior, and media analysts speculated on potential fallout. The digital frenzy had reached a tipping point, where online perception and live broadcast tension fed into each other in a continuous loop. What made this eruption so compelling wasn't just Meghan's actions. It was the convergence of live television, real-time commentary, and social media amplification. The physical events on the set were magnified by the psychological impact, the instantaneous global audience, and the viral nature of digital content. The result was an unprecedented level of engagement, with millions of viewers emotionally invested in what had started as a Halloween segment. And just when it seemed the social media storm had reached its peak, an unexpected leak of behind-the-scenes footage began circulating online. Clips showing Meghan's backstage interactions, subtle gestures toward production staff, and moments of private conversation emerged. The videos were shared rapidly, adding context, intrigue, and suspense to the already viral narrative. Analysts and fans debated the implications, questioning intent, professionalism, and the unfolding dynamics in ways that intensified curiosity and speculation even further. The moment Meghan Markle's behavior began to escalate on the Today Show set, the tension wasn't confined to the studio floor. It rippled instantly through the entire NBC production hierarchy. From executive producers to floor managers, from segment coordinators to camera operators, everyone understood that the unfolding situation was no longer simply a Halloween mishap. It had evolved into a high-stakes incident, the kind that could define reputations, dominate headlines, and potentially spiral out of control if mishandled. In the control room, the atmosphere was electric. Screens lined the walls, displaying multiple camera angles, live feeds, and timing monitors. Producers were communicating rapidly via headsets, their voices clipped with urgency as they relayed instructions to floor staff. Keep it calm. Don't react. Cue the segment for a soft transition. Monitor Meghan. Watch her movements. Every word was strategic, every pause measured. The control room was a nerve center, coordinating dozens of moving parts simultaneously while anticipating the unpredictable. Executive producers were on high alert. They were seasoned veterans, used to managing high-profile guests and live events. But few had ever faced a situation quite like this. Meghan's presence, her combination of charm, assertiveness, and unpredictability, presented a unique challenge. She was not just a guest. She was a force capable of controlling attention, influencing reactions, and subtly manipulating the narrative. And the stakes were enormous. Millions of viewers watching live, thousands more commenting in real time on social media, and internal scrutiny from corporate leadership all converging simultaneously. Back on the studio floor, Savannah Guthrie and Jenna Bush Hager were receiving rapid-fire updates from producers and stage managers via discreet earpieces. The messages were precise, almost surgical in their intent. Redirect conversation. Maintain professional tone. Avoid escalating gestures. Prepare security if necessary. Every instruction reflected the dual need to continue the live broadcast seamlessly while preparing for potential intervention. It was a delicate balancing act. Too heavy-handed an approach risked humiliation or confrontation. Too light an approach risked chaos spilling into live television. Meanwhile, floor managers moved like ghosts through the studio, coordinating camera angles, monitoring the audience, and keeping a keen eye on Meghan's movements. Every step she took, every subtle gesture, was analyzed for intent and potential disruption. Crew members whispered quietly, sharing observations. She's leaning towards Savannah. Watch her eyes. Check the costume. Any props that might obstruct movement? Keep an earpiece ready. Security might be needed any second. The tension was both psychological and logistical, a constant high-wire act with no safety net. Inside the control room, producers debated strategy. One suggested attempting to redirect Meghan with humor, leveraging her playful energy to calm the tension. Another recommended subtle physical cues from security, positioning themselves discreetly to signal authority without causing panic. The debate highlighted the challenge of managing live television in the age of unpredictable celebrity behavior. Every option carried risk. Every decision could be amplified in real time by millions of viewers online. Adding to the complexity was the awareness of social media. Clips of Meghan's earlier interactions had already gone viral, generating commentary that ranged from admiration to criticism to outright ridicule. NBC leadership knew that any misstep could be broadcast instantly, analyzed endlessly, and turned into a public relations crisis within minutes. This awareness heightened the internal stress. The team wasn't just producing a Halloween segment. They were managing an event under the glare of a global audience with the added pressure of instantaneous public feedback. Security personnel were integral to the internal response. They had been monitoring Meghan from her arrival, noting her proximity to hosts, her hand gestures, and her posture. Subtle adjustments had been made, positioning themselves strategically near exits, keeping a discreet but visible presence, and communicating with each other via earpiece. They were trained to intervene if necessary, but discretion was paramount. Any overt movement could escalate the situation further or draw unwanted attention on camera. One key challenge for NBC executives was communication. In the control room, multiple layers of messaging were happening simultaneously. Floor managers relayed information about the live audience and Meghan's position. Producers monitored the camera feeds and host reactions. Security communicated via encrypted channels, ready to respond at a moment's notice. And executives were reviewing live social media trends, anticipating public perception while making split-second decisions to safeguard both the show and its reputation. Amid this complex choreography, the tension escalated further when Meghan made another subtle, pointed remark during the live segment. While it sounded innocuous on air, the hosts and crew understood the underlying provocation. Savannah's lips tightened slightly. Jenna's posture stiffened. The control room erupted into whispered discussions. Should security step closer? Should the camera angles be adjusted to minimize exposure? Was the next comment going to push the situation into a breaking point? In the production offices, internal messaging surged. Emails, text messages, and instant communications flowed between executives, legal teams, and on-set managers. Contingency plans were reviewed. What if Meghan refused to leave the stage? What if a confrontation became physical? What were the liabilities? And how could NBC protect both its talent and reputation? Every decision had to be weighed against public optics, legal ramifications, and the potential for viral dissemination. Producers also coordinated subtly with the hosts. Savannah and Jenna were briefed on potential cues, gentle verbal nudges, soft eye contact, subtle hand gestures, to manage Meghan without escalating the tension. They were instructed to continue the segment as smoothly as possible while being prepared for abrupt intervention. The dual responsibility, entertaining the audience and managing an unpredictable guest, created immense pressure. Every line spoken, every pause taken, every reaction observed carried multiple layers of consequence. Amid the controlled chaos, a tense psychological game was unfolding. Executives, producers, and crew were simultaneously managing the live broadcast and attempting to anticipate Meghan's next move. Every decision was tactical, every movement calculated, every glance analyzed. And throughout it all, the understanding persisted. Live television is unforgiving, and the unpredictability of a guest like Meghan Markle magnifies every minor misstep into potential disaster. Then came the pivotal moment that truly crystallized the internal panic. Meghan made a comment that, while superficially playful, carried undeniable edge and implication, enough for producers, hosts, and security to recognize the tipping point had been reached. The control room erupted into a flurry of coordination. Cues were relayed, security was positioned, camera angles were adjusted, and the hosts were given subtle instructions to maintain composure. It was a coordinated effort to manage the imminent escalation without derailing the live broadcast or alarming the audience. This was the culmination of internal reactions, minutes of strategic thinking, instant communication, and high-pressure decision-making. Every professional involved understood that what happened next would define not only the segment, but potentially the reputation.